You're an advertiser and you're spending on ads on different platforms and channels. The amount of advertising that you spend is directly linked to your revenue. Typically, a certain percentage of the revenue is allocated to advertising. Of course, if you're a small or a new brand, you're allocating a larger part of your revenue to advertising compared to a more established and bigger brands. That is normal. But regardless of the amount of ad budget that you're managing, there is one question that, whether it's big or small, there's one question that every advertiser and marketeers is interested in. What is the return on ads? Introducing ROAS, or return on ad spend. This is a very familiar topic to a lot of marketeers, and like any other thing in marketing, ROAS also has a lot of nuances. Understanding these nuances can be very important for determining the right marketing strategies and what you can get from your advertising. Let's define ROAS formally. ROAS is defined by this formula, which is very similar to the formula of ROI. ROAS determines the change in revenue per dollar spent on ads. It can be reported as a percentage or as an absolute dollar, euro, or any other currencies that you're using. For example, a ROAS of 200% is equal to a ROAS of $2, meaning that for every dollar spent, one additional dollar is made. Ideally, we want to have the ROAS at least to be $1 or 100%. That is the break-even point. ROAS is usually reported at the channel level. For example, the ROAS of Google search or the ROAS of the Meta ads campaign. Let's look at the formula. Looking at this formula, the lower number, amount of ad spend, is very clear. How much did you spend? Just look at your platform's invoice or credit card invoices. But how about the upper part of this formula? This is where things get complicated. To say what the revenue is from the ad spend to a certain channel, we need to solve the attribution problem. How much of our sales can be attributed to channel A versus channel B? But everyone knows that attribution is very difficult. Unless we use a cookie-based technique that traces user activities across the web, we are not able to solve this attribution problem clearly for every user and every channel. This could have been possible back in 2010, but it is no longer an option due to privacy restrictions and cookie blockers. Thanks for that. In my view, ROAS can be seen as an attempt to isolate the impact of a channel regardless of what is in the marketing mix, at least theoretically. This seems simple, but it's not that easy in practice. Let's look at one example. Imagine you're a marketeer and you have two marketing channels, Google Ads and Facebook Ads. You can look into the platforms. You go into analytics section of each platforms and you look at the ROAS that is reported by Google and Meta. You pick whichever ROAS is the largest and allocate the biggest part of your budget, advertising budget, to that channel until the ROAS values for the two channels even up, they become similar. It seems very simple and it seems quite smart and logical, but in reality, it doesn't work like that, unfortunately. It is known that platforms exaggerate their ROAS. They claim the bigger part of your revenue to their advertising, and as a result, they're inflating the value. Imagine you're a marketeer and you have a multi-channel marketing, and you look at the ROAS across different platforms and you see this exaggerated high-value ROAS. And when you look at your final revenue, it doesn't quite add up, and that can be very frustrating. Biggest issue with the in-platform ROAS values is that it's pure fantasy. They're just wrong, they're exaggerated. Another aspect of ROAS that it assumes that different channels are contributing independently from other channels. This could be an interesting idea, but in reality, it doesn't work like that. In marketing, there are different channels. You have channels that are increasing awareness. There are channels and campaigns that increasing considerations. And finally, there are channels that maximize and increase conversion. Every channel plays a role within your marketing funnel through the buyer journey. And by saying that every channel is independent from each other is a bit of a fantasy than the reality. If we use a naive approach in measuring the impact of channels to the revenue, we may find ourselves that spending all our budget on lower funnel channels, such as search, for example. And that is wrong. There is a danger in that, which I am going to tell you why. There is an issue in terms of measuring the different channels. The lower funnel channels are easier to measure by nature, while the upper funnel channels, such as TV and radio, are more complex, they are more difficult to measure. So there is a measurability problem depending on where the channel stands across the funnel. And that can introduce a bias to your decisions, and that bias can be dangerous. For example, if you are measuring in a multi-channel marketing, you're measuring and finding that a lot of kind of sales can be attributed to the lower funnels, you may be tempted to allocate the biggest part of your budget to the lower funnel channels, and you may enjoy increase in sales, a peak in sales for a few months, for several quarters, but over a long run, you're going to damage your brand and you're going to deplete the brand value that you have. In a long run, that is also going to affect your sales, and that's not a sustainable approach or a strategy to be at. Learning from this, we can conclude that channels are dependent on each other. They are not working in isolation or independently from each other. Let's give an example, as an imaginary example. So you have a channel A, let's call it, and you have a perfect way of measuring the ROAS for this channel, and that is $1.5. For every dollar spent, you are getting 50 cents return. Perfect. Now, you keep the spend amount for channel A, this channel, the same, exact same amount. But what you are going to do is that you are changing the other channels, the mix, the spend in different channels within that mix. And all of a sudden you find that the ROAS of this channel either increases or decreases. For example, it becomes $2. Again, remember, we haven't changed anything about the spend of channel A, but the value of channel A, the ROAS went up just because we have manipulated, we have changed the other channels within the mix. This is because marketing channels are not independent. They are working and interacting with each other in the reality. And so as a marketeer, your job is to find how this interaction works in reality, even if you can't perfectly quantify it. So let's conclude. ROAS is an amazing value. It's interesting to have. It gives you a directional kind of understanding of where you're marketing at, but there are issues with ROAS. First of all, never use in-platform reported ROAS values because they're exaggerated and inflated. Never use them for budgeting decisions, or even worse, at the board meeting or reporting to the CEO or the CMO. Second, in marketing, all the channels are interacting, and lower funnel, right? Lower funnel channels are having an easier job to clarify and define the ROAS. And that can lead to a bias in terms of you are going to allocate most of your budget to those lower funnel channels. And that could lead in a long run to an unsustainable growth and a permanent damage to your brand. See ROAS always with a grain of salt, something that it can be useful directionally and it can give you some interesting insights, but always be skeptical, always ask questions, and keep in mind all these complexities that I just mentioned in this video. Thanks for watching, and if you like similar videos, this type of topics, please follow our channel, subscribe to our channels, and put a like on this video. Thank you.